Today, we're diving into a centuries-old legal mystery, straight from the Talmud. We're going to follow the clues, the contradictions, and these just brilliant reversals of logic as the ancient sages dig into a question that seems simple on the surface, but you'll see how the argument itself can be way more important than the final answer.
So here's our case file for today. We'll start with the basic facts, get the lay of the land. Then we'll hit our first major contradiction. We're going to explore some competing theories from the key players and follow the evidence all the way to its really surprising and very telling conclusion. Okay, let's jump right in. To really get what this whole mystery is about, we first have to understand the two key procedures at the heart of the entire debate. First up, we've got shechita. You can think of this as the standard operating procedure for kosher slaughter. It's a really precise cut to the front of the neck, and the goal is to sever the windpipe and the esophagus, which are known as the simanim. And then there's this other method, melikah. This is a totally distinct and, specialized technique that was only used for certain bird offerings back in the ancient temple. This one's done from the back of the neck, from the nape. So right away we have two different methods for two totally different situations. Now, along comes the sage Shmuel, and he proposes this really simple, elegant rule to connect these two acts. He basically suggests a perfect parallel. Any spot that's valid for a cut from the front corresponds to a valid spot on the back. It's so clean, so logical. But in law, a rule like this isn't just an observation. It's designed to solve a problem. And not right there, that's where our investigation really kicks off. This principle is a tool. It's designed to prevent a specific kind of error. So the big question is, what invalid act is Shmuel's rule actually trying to forbid? So our first line of inquiry takes us to a really physical question about the act of cutting itself. And, right away, we hit a snag. The most obvious way to read Shmuel's parallel rule is this. Okay, if ripping the windpipe and esophagus out of place before you cut them disqualifies a standard slaughter, then it has to disqualify the special pinching method too. It makes perfect sense, right? Parallel is parallel. But just when we think we've got it all figured out, another sage, Reme Bar Yecheskel, just throws a giant wrench in the works. He's got this teaching that says for birds, ripping the simanim is not a disqualifying factor at all. And just like that, our neat little parallel is completely broken. And this slide just lays out our central conflict perfectly. On the left, Shmuel's principle demands this perfect symmetry between the two methods. But on the right, Rami's teaching creates this clear exception just for birds. Both of these statements are from really respected authorities, but they seem to completely contradict each other. So how do we resolve this? So, faced with this contradiction, another sage, Rav Papa, enters the investigation. He looks at this conflict and suggests, hey, maybe we're asking the wrong question entirely.
Rav Papa comes up with this brilliant alternative. He says Shmuel's rule isn't about the action of ripping at all. No, it's about the location. He argues the whole point of the rule is to forbid starting the cut too high up on that bony incline of the head, an area that's invalid for both methods.
And this just illustrates his point perfectly. Rav Papa argues that even if you finish the cut in the right spot, if you start it in the wrong one up on that incline, it invalidates the whole process. And this is clever because it preserves Shmuel's parallel without contradicting what Rami said about ripping. It's a really slick legal workaround.
This brings us to a much, much deeper level of our investigation. Why is there so much disagreement here in the first place? Well, Rav Acha suggests that the answer lies in the very origin of the law itself.
Rav Acha presents this crucial chain of logic, which you can kind of follow on the slide. He argues that if the law for slaughtering birds was rabbinic, it would have to be based on the Torah's laws for animals. And for animals, ripping is absolutely forbidden. So, for Rami to permit ripping for birds, he must believe that the law for birds is unique and comes directly from the Torah itself. So just as Rav Acha's theory seems to neatly explain this whole underlying disagreement, another sage, Rav Ashi, comes onto the scene and just turns the entire argument completely on its head. This is the pivot point of our whole detective story. Rav Ashi listens to Rav Acha's really neat explanation, and then he delivers this just stunning rebuttal. On the contrary, the opposite is reasonable.
Just look at how he flips the logic. Rav Ashi argues that a law that's derived rabbinically has to be strict and follow its source, in this case, the animal laws. But a law that's given directly in the Torah could have its own unique orally transmitted details, like, say, permitting the ripping of simanim for birds. So it's actually the position that allows ripping that points to a Torah origin, which is the exact opposite of what Rav Asha just claimed.
Okay, so we are still reeling from this incredible intellectual reversal when our final witness, Ravina, arrives with one last piece of evidence that changes everything we thought we knew.
And this is a bombshell. Ravina clarifies that Rami's controversial ruling, the one that says ripping is okay, well, it only applied to that special temple offering, melikah. For standard slaughter, for shechita, ripping is in fact invalid.
This just forces us right back to square one. If ripping is invalid for slaughter, but it's valid for pinching, then the two methods are absolutely not parallel. This new testimony seems to directly refute the very first piece of evidence in our case, Shmuel's beautiful, elegant rule of symmetry.
And this is the final verdict. The Talmud states that the halacha, the final practical law, it simply disagrees with Shmuel's initial statement. It doesn't try to resolve the contradiction. It doesn't declare one sage right and the other wrong. It just allows the conflict to stand, preserving both viewpoints in the text.
And that is the most profound clue of all. In this detective story, the goal wasn't to find a single culprit or a simple answer. It was to explore every single possibility, to test every logical angle, and to value the intellectual journey itself. The twists and turns were the point. And it really reveals a deeper truth. Sometimes, the greatest insight comes not from resolving a contradiction, but from understanding exactly why it exists in the first place.